Don't we have a dress code around here?
Can't get your shirt.
Madam President, Commissioners, good morning. It's now 11:30.
All right, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and start with our pre-commission agenda. Does anybody have any comments or concerns about the agenda for today?
Madam President, thank you. I just wanted to say a few things, kudos especially. It took me all weekend to read through that hazardous mitigation, part 1 and part 2. But if you live through Snowmageddon, you know how vital it was that we had a system in operations of all the agencies working together, you know, and then it's like, wow, okay, cyber disruption, dam failure, we haven't had that, thank goodness, but we have had droughts and landslides and utilities, and how important it's to closely work together. So I just want to sort of tag that and say, let's, if we can have in the new year a report to us. Hopefully we won't have Snowmageddon between now and then, and we're actually implementing it. But I know that was such a critical thing for us to do in partnership with local government. So I just want to tag that and say sometime in the early in the year, have a report on what our roles would be, because of course the transportation system is critical in all that. I had one question on number 5 on the mag chloride contract. So it makes sense, you know, we go with the lower bid, makes sense. Envirotech, I guess, gave it in the past. We're going with Dustbusters, but it didn't say anything about the supply chain, and that was our problem last year. And do we do anything in evaluating the supply chain on these companies, whether one has a better supply chain or how? Because that's going to be the problem. It's not whether it's like, yeah, we can come after you because you couldn't deliver. So do we have any concerns about the supply chain on the mag chloride?
Madam President, Commissioner Henson, great question. Yes, sort of, we do. As you recall, I think it was 2 years ago when we had issues with a supply company coming out of Salt Lake regarding salt. We did go after them,
Right.
and we did fine them for failure to delivery, and we changed contracts at that same time. We do look very carefully at past history. We have done work with Ghostbusters, with Dustbusters, before we were comfortable with their operation. And as you may have noticed, this was part of the rebid process. In other words, in the past, the initial company had really supercharged us. And so by this one right here, we're saving an additional $15,000 on this rebid.
Yeah, I saw the financial savings, which makes sense.
Yeah. But we do look at auto parts, Napa, the whole 9 yards. Now, that being said, do we, as we've been briefing, do we foresee challenges going forward? Yes, we do.
Yeah, because we got to have it. It's
right.
The minute the weather shifts, it's got to be there. Nobody's patient with us and said, well, if you wait a few months, we'll get it. And I just want to give kudos. I really appreciate the good work. And I see Tim's here and the other partners on number 10, the CCDC agreement. Thank you. I really, really appreciate the hard work that went into putting that together. I read through it and appreciate that we're moving forward on that. Thank you.
That's a start. Yeah. All right. Any other questions about the agenda? No? All right. Director Wong?
Okay, thank you. Well, Commissioners, good morning. In front of you, you have 2 handouts. The first one, Break Up Boise event. If you have nothing to do on Saturday around 9 o'clock, you're more than welcome to join us, but we've already been assigned 2 homes, and it's a great effort, and it's a great operation. The second one is the ACHG's annual Veterans Day Thanksgiving luncheon. Of course, you're all invited. We'll be at the Adams broom hanger this year based on the number of people we have across the board. And that's honoring all of ACHG's veterans again. So if you're able to join us, we would love to have you on both of them. Commissioners, today I would like to highlight our communications team and share just insights as to the great things they are doing for ACHD moving forward. First, our team just hosted, I think it was yesterday, another in the series of the communication connection meetings, where this is geared toward increasing awareness, transparency, and collaboration. This week, we hosted communication team members from Garden City, Boise Schools, City of Meridian, Ada County, City of Kuna, Kuna Schools, City of Star, City of Boise, Ada County Landfill, LTAC, the Meridian Chamber of Commerce, the City of Eagle, and CCDC. Again, in sharing ideas, insights, concerns across the board for communication. So it's really a great program that our communications team has done a tremendous effort in standing up, and it's being very, very profitable. Just as a review for recent PIMs that we've had, U-Stick Black Hat 10 mile to U-Stick 10 mile to Linder, I'd like to let you know a couple insights. Now, these closed late last week, so we'll continue to give you more information. But initially, the U-Stick Black Hat to 10 mile project, we had 37 total survey responses, 31 people agreed with the project design, 4 were unsure, 2 disagreed with the project design. However, there were over 1,000 visits to the project webpage, which shows tremendous interest across the board. On the U-Stick to 10 mile to Linder project, we had 104 total survey responses. Most agree with the project design. The main concerns include the construction timeline, 5 Mile Creek's impact, and the traffic light at Bridge Tower, as some oppose putting a traffic light in Bridge Tower. There were over 420 visits to the project webpage. The Lake Hazel Eagle to Cloverdale PIM will close this Thursday. So far, we've had 35 total survey responses, 23 agree with the project design, 3 are unsure, 6 disagree with the project design, and we've had 353 site visits. The Garden Street Sidewalks and Bikeway project, this launched last week, and as of yesterday, we've had over 35 comments, 312 webpage views. Most are in favor of the project, and the online live thing will be on Wednesday. For the 8th Street Corridor Study, Franklin to Union, advertising for next round of outreach will start next week. And for the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan, advertising starts next week for the first round of public engagement to get the public's ideas about projects they would like us to see. You recall we've expanded the outreach opportunities on the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan. And then finally, of course, one of my favorite, the Virtual Reality Roundabout project. We will be getting that finished product in the middle of January, and we anticipate it being presented to you by the beginning of February. As you recall, that was the magic goggle training scenario on how to use a roundabout that BSU is working with us on. So anyway, I'd like to spend the rest of my time reviewing with you the October initiatives and what our team members are doing for November going forward. So for maintenance, for October, as you recall, the fleet began refining the process for vehicle assignments in our computer systems to not only identify the right vehicle to the right department and or person, but also properly track and tread and record the vehicles. We were very successful in this initiative as we identified 22% of the light vehicle duty vehicles were either not assigned to a wrong user, and or assigned to the incorrect department. With aligning this, we will now be able to better understand the environmental impacts and subsequent costs of these assets to enhance both vehicle assignments and the fleet sustainability items. For November, maintenance is going to initiate a tire conditioning program to begin the process of benchmarking light-duty vehicles, dump trucks, and trailers, their current tire tread measurements. To facilitate this, we will be taking tire tread depth measurements on approximately 1,030 vehicles, tires, to partner in partnership with our vendor. The ACHD fleet team We'll track the specific vehicles and the location and tread depth to repeat this process in 6 months. In other words, to establish a standard tread wear per vehicle protocol. Based on these measurements, we will be able to better forecast tire life cycles and as such, increase both effective and efficient costs and replacement protocols for our entire fleet. For plans and projects, the October initiative was to support the Walk to School Day and the Ride Bright program, which we successfully supported in doing for these critical safety protocols by distributing bike lights, backpacks, lights, and promoting safety amongst children who walk and bike to school. Additionally, we distributed 7,000 English and 430 Spanish bike maps to 70 schools across Ada County. It was a huge success going forward. For November, Plans and Projects initiative is to incorporate our 2 new e-bikes, thank you commissioners again for allowing us to do that, to the ACHD fleet and begin to actively use them to put wheels on the ground when developing new or improving existing ACHD bicycle infrastructure. Before the bikes are put into service, they will undergo a safety check by a certified e-bike mechanic. Moreover, safety procedures and trainings for riders will be prepared so that the ACH team members who use the e-bikes will be well acquainted with them and we will be confident and they will be confident in their use. Of note, the e-bikes will be displayed in front of all of you on December 7th or 14th. Commissioner Goldthorpe, I assume you still have your suit and you'll be ready to go, correct? Your spandex suit that you threatened everybody with? Okay, thank you. Development and Technical Services. For October, D&T successfully explored and implemented multiple structural and procedural changes to enhance ACHD's permitting process, which led, just to name one, to us standing up ACHD's first fiber team. This team's mission will be to focus on all aspects of Ada County's fiber development, which we believe will greatly enhance effective operations and reduce customer frustrations, which is the main goal on this. This is a very tall challenge for us, but we do remain confident. For November, D&T will enhance and increase safety protocols for our TMC team members. We will be working with the Ada County Sheriff and other agencies to address high-stress situations while enhancing camera and lighting coverage outside the TMC, while also designating secure parking for our TMC operators when occur after duty hours so we can ensure the safety and well-being and the appropriate support for our TMC operators that may be involved with high-stress issues throughout Ada County. For communications, for October, the ACHD communications team successfully transitioned to a new public project, an engagement tool called Engagement HQ, or Bang the Table. This initiative is part of our larger rebranding effort that will be completed with a new website. The initiative was a huge success as we now provide a user-friendly experience for customers looking to learn more about or provide input to projects and programs. This tool now helps the public find information on everything from capital projects and studies to the integrated 5-year work plan, environmental programs, community projects, community contests, and everything in between. For November, our communications team will be putting out a full press media blitz on winter operations to include ACHD preparations, customer recommendations they want us to consider, and offering video insights as to how our team operates during winter storms. Of note, you will most likely see the triumphant return of chippy roads. For HR October, we had intended to distribute a dedicated hero wall that celebrates our people as they continue to enhance ACHD's culture based on innovation and excellence. But we have put this on hold until the new logo is established with our Instead, we initiated a team spirit event called Barco Treat, which, as you all know, was a huge success and definitely was well received by all of our team members and our many four-legged guests that joined us here at ACHD. For November, HR will be implementing a new job coding system due to the continued transformation of ACHD job. More on this as we get into December. For our treasurer in October, our accounting team's task was and remains to pass the annual audit. Although not completed, we are confident that we're doing quite well again on this. For November, our treasurer and our accounting team close out our FY22 and of course pass the audit with flying colors. Commissioners, I have two things I'd like to share with you now. They're both videos, part of my director's report. The first one is an initiative that our environmental team, Stormwater, has taken to start better educate the public on stormwater operations.
What is stormwater?
There it goes.
Stormwater is snow melt and rain that flows into the storm drain system. Stormwater flows across hard surfaces like sidewalks, driveways, roadways, and rooftops. Along the way, stormwater can pick up pollutants such as lawn chemicals, vehicle oil and grease, airborne dust, sediment, and pet waste. Unlike the water you use in your home, stormwater is not treated at a wastewater treatment plant. Whatever makes its way into the storm drain system goes directly into our local waterways. You probably know that the Ada County Highway District stormwater is not treated at a wastewater treatment plant. Whatever makes its way into the storm drain system goes directly into our local waterways. You probably know that the Ada County Highway District manages the local roadways, but did you also know that ACHD also operates and maintains approximately 49,000 storm drain structures and 720 miles of storm drain pipe across the county, all of which are directly connected to ground or surface waters like the Boise River. Stormwater can pick up many pollutants from neighborhoods, businesses, construction sites, accidental spills, and illegal dumping, and protecting the storm drain system and downstream waterway is not one person's job. It takes all of our Ada County residents, businesses, and entities working together to keep our waterways healthy for all to enjoy. So what do we do on our end to manage all of that? ACHD maintains Phase 1 and Phase 2 stormwater permits that allow us to discharge stormwater from Ada County roadways to surface waters. To do this, we are required to develop stormwater management plans, which document how we protect downstream waterways by reducing the discharge of pollutants from the storm drain system. The Phase 1 Stormwater Management Plan, which covers Boise and Garden City, is reviewed and updated annually to ensure we are meeting permit requirements and implementing programs and activities to protect water quality. You can access the updated Phase 1 Stormwater Management Plan by visiting achdIdaho.org/stormwater. So let's check it out and begin at the table of contents. You'll see a list of subject headings for each section of the plan. Each of these headings is a hyperlink to help you skip to that section. Links are provided throughout the plan to connect you to outside resources where you will find additional information. Section 5 addresses the programs and activities that protect water quality. These programs and activities are called stormwater control measures. These measures are organized beginning with a brief description of the control measure, followed by the associated permit requirements, current compliance activities, and a list of our planned compliance activities for the year. As you can see, finding the information you need is only a click away. So use the plan to explore your interests and see how we work to protect stormwater and water quality in Ada County. We want to know what you think. A short survey is available at achdIdaho.org/stormwater. We appreciate your participation and feedback so we better understand your perspective when reviewing and updating the plan each year. You can delve deeper into ACHD and current stormwater quality program activities by visiting our website, achdIdaho.org, and don't forget to follow us on social media. Thank you for helping us to protect the storm drain system and keeping local downstream waterways clean and healthy.
So Commissioners, again, that was produced in-house by both our communications team and our stormwater experts. Goes out on Media Blitz, and hopefully it'll make a tremendous impact for all. The last thing I'd like to share with you is you all know that Friday is Veterans Day, and ACHD will be closed to honor the event. As I've said, next Thursday, you're all invited to the Veterans Thanksgiving Luncheon. But I shared this with our entire team during the all-staff as a tribute to veterans, and I want to share it with all of you.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear. To support and defend. The Constitution of the United States. Against all enemies. Foreign and domestic. And to bear true faith. And allegiance to the same. That I will obey. The orders of. The President of the United States. And the orders of. Those officers appointed over me according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God.
We celebrate Veterans Day on the anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. The armistice that began on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The timing of this holiday is quite deliberate in terms of historical fact. But somehow it always seems quite fitting to me that this day comes deep in autumn, when the colors are muted and the days seem to invite contemplation. It is, in a way, an odd thing to honor those who died in defense of our country, in defense of us, in wars far away. The imagination plays a trick. We see these soldiers in our mind as old and wise, but most of them were boys when they died, and they gave up two lives, the one they were living and the one they would have lived. When they died, they gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up their chance to be revered old men. They gave up everything for our country, for us. And all we can do is remember. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. In memory of those who gave the last full measure of devotion, may our efforts to achieve lasting peace gain strength. Let us make a vow to our dead. Let us show them by our actions that we understand what they died for. Strengthened by their courage, heartened by their value, and born for their memory, let us continue to stand for the ideals for which they lived and died.
Have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor deserve it. We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
Madam President, Commissioners, that ends my director's report.
All right, thank you very much. Looks like we have about 6 minutes, so thank you.
Madam President, Commissioners, good afternoon. It's now noon.
Welcome, everyone. Please stand and join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. First item, Commissioners, adopted agenda. Do
So
we have
moved.
a motion?
Oh, someone said they had a question.
I move to adopt the agenda.
Well, I'll second it.
Consent agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or a citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless noted. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. That takes us to our regular agenda. We have one item on that today, the FY22 fourth quarter impact fee report. We welcome Miss Christine Taylor.
Almost forgot.
Welcome back.
Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Christine Tandler. I'm here to present the fourth quarter of FY22 ending balance. Oh, hang on. So we began the year at $7.5 million, and we ended the fourth quarter at $9.7 million of a program balance within the impact fee program. We did have some significant expenses in quarter preservation in the last quarter that brought down that balance. Some main impact fee eligible projects, again, the corridor preservation right-of-way purchases, 10 Mile and Victory project, Maple Grove, Victory to Overland, as well as right-of-way related to the Linder and Floating Feather Roundabout. On the extraordinary impact fees, we're sitting at about a $2.9 million balance there. There has been some movement related to the extension of Pierce Park, so we will be seeing a payment going out on that. I'll say soon, but I don't know what that means. And in accordance with the amended ordinance that went into effect October 1st to 22 and resolution 2331, the impact fee program has a balance of $9.7 million. I'll stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Christine. Commissioners, any questions for Christine?
So, Madam
Commissioner
President.
Hanson?
Yeah, thank you. Christine, just to go back one slide, I have a question. The Warm Springs Mesa extraordinary impact fee goes from 22.2 to 0. Is that related to the Starview project work? Because obviously that's a whole lot
Madam
more.
President, Commissioner Hanson, so that has to do with, as we get impact fees in for lots that are developing, we pay that back out to JHYs. And so it kind of just depends on when the checks are issued.
Okay.
At the end of the year, depending on if there's an ending balance or not. So we got the remainder of the FY22 collections paid out and recorded within FY22, which is why it shows a zero balance.
Oh, good. Yeah. And so it's unrelated to the Starview, because we're holding on to a bond, I think, for the reconstruction of Starview as part of that project.
Yeah.
Which is unrelated.
Okay, yeah, I
Thank
don't know anything about that.
All right, thank you.
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney.
Hey, Mary.
Christine, just a quick question. The impact fee balance from year to year, we looked at, you had that on one of your slides, and I'm wondering, do we, in fact, I think the next slide is the one, do we project looking forward with respect to our integrated 5-year work plan, do we make projections as to those projects that are impact fee eligible to kind of sense where this is going?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, we do through the integrated 5-year work plan process. So all of the impact fee eligibility percentages and then estimated project costs are in our integrated 5-year work plan. And then as we go through, that is one of the items that we do look at when we program. So we don't have a really good look going forward right now because of the pause that was taken for the review of the prioritization process last year, but it is something that we do look at. And as we project revenue forward, we do look and see where we'll go with that.
Okay.
I can tell you we do have several really big projects that are kind of holding out there. The Orchard Street realignment is a big one. It's almost 100% impact fee eligible.
Okay.
So we do have some really big projects out there. But yes, we do review that and then make those changes with relation to this most recent ordinance change in there to update those percentages.
So are we going to be, will we have that information in front of us when we get back into looking at the integrated 5-year work plan, or is it going to take a little longer to get that information? When are we going to be able to see, to get a sense for that? How long is it likely to take to kind of, before that's kind of together?
I'm not going to assign when that's going to be done.
Mr. Lucas?
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, my name is Justin Lucas. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management. So we have several work sessions planned related to the integrated 5-year work plan starting in the new year. And so, commissioners, if there's a desire to review that information, we can make that part of one of those. It would be either in January or March. Probably March, when we have more of the financial data put together as we're putting together the plan. So we can do a review of impact fees and the use of those fees as allocated within the plan. We can make that part of the conversation.
Okay, great. Yeah, actually, speaking for myself, I'd like to see that. So I hope that'll be part of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you. All right, that was our only item on the regular agenda. Is there anyone here for public communications? Marissa? Well, go ahead and state your name and address, please.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Marissa Keith. I am at 280 North 8th Street in Boise this time. Since August, I've been working at Idaho Smart Growth as their statewide Safe Routes to School coordinator. And as part of that position, I've been helping Cynthia Gibson at the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance plan the World Day of Remembrance for road traffic victims. And so our preliminary data shows that from 2017 through 2021, there were 518 total fatal and serious injuries of bicycles and pedestrians. That's on all roads within the state of Idaho, including the ITD roads. And so the World Day of Remembrance this year is going to be Sunday, November 20th. It's from 12 to 2 at the State House. It's going to be on the steps of the State House. And so I'm just here to invite all of the commission and ACHD staff, anybody in the audience, both in person and on Zoom, that would like to attend. You're all welcome to come. This is kind of a somber event, but it is, children would be welcome, and this would also be like a great opportunity for new drivers, teen drivers, or those drivers that have recently gotten into some trouble to attend also. So we will be sending out more information to your emails.
Very good. Thank you, Marissa. All right, is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? All right. No? Okay. All right, thank you very much. Then we will adjourn our meeting and move into our post-commission agenda. Our first work session is the 2022 Master Street Map Update, presentation by staff, and Mr. Lucas will be doing that for us. Welcome, Mr. Lucas.
Madam President, members of the commission, thank you. Once again, for the record, my name is Justin Lucas, Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management here at the Highway District. They drug me up here today. Edinson would usually be doing this, but we did anticipate several questions from the commission that may require some historical context and analysis of policy considerations. Therefore, because I'm one of the few employees here at ACHD who was actually here when all this got put together the first time, the Master Street Map, I was tasked with coming up here to do that. I'm glad to do it. There is a lot of history with this document and purpose, and that being stated, we're here to discuss this year's update and go through some of those items that the commission specifically asked us to bring back for discussion purposes.
All right, very good.
On that note, I did want to highlight, we go through this every couple of years. This year, and it's primarily at the staff level. We get together with the staffs from all of our partner jurisdictions. We sit down, we talk about the map, we talk about potential amendments based on development activity and based on the comprehensive plans of the individual communities. This is a really collaborative effort. And I would just like to note that there was about 68 amendment requests, and we were able to work out the vast majority of those as part of this process. There are 14 that remain, I would say, without direction at this time. Staff didn't feel comfortable including these 14 into the amended map based on the analysis that we performed with the policy that we use to help us make these decisions, which is adopted by the commission and in our policy manual. And really there's those two ways to amend the map, which is through broad scale comprehensive plan changes or through development activity. And so when we lacking those two things and absent of other commission direction, we don't feel comfortable at the staff level making those decisions. I do want to clearly state at the outset, the commission has broad discretion with the master street map and interpretation of your policies. And so if there is something from the staff that we didn't feel comfortable including that you would like to include, that's why we're here today. So just wanted to get that out of the way as we go forward. We've been through this originally adopted in 2010 as part of our what we call the Transportation Land Use Integration Plan process that occurred at that time. That process was comprehensive and it included all of our partner agencies, and the Master Street Map was one of the major outcomes of that process. It has been amended many times since its original adoption, and we bring this generally about every 2 years in front of you. This is that amendment procedure that I referenced. As I was stating, it's primarily development applications and comprehensive plan changes that trigger those, and then we bring it forward biannually. So we're here today. We've been doing a lot of work on this. It's been over a year that we've been going back and forth and working. Commissioner Pickering.
Madam President, I have a question.
Commissioner Pickering.
Justin, do you mind going back one slide?
Sure.
Just a quick clarification. So on that first bullet, defined by ACHD policy 3111.3, amendment request for the development applications. So hypothetically, if say Garden City has a new development, right? They are requesting, a different change within the master street map, but yet if that request still doesn't reflect what our policy states, then that amendment wouldn't be changed, right?
Madam President, members of the commission, Commissioner Pickering. So through the development process, the city or the applicant can basically request whatever they want, regardless of whether it's on the map or not. Mm-hmm. Staff would use the map as a guide through that development process to help determine whether that street kind of fit in the long-range vision. But through the development process, the commission and the cities and the county have broad discretion to modify the map. So when through this policy, what it's basically stating is that is one of the main ways the map is amended, is through the development process. Sometimes there's developments that come in that are unanticipated. Sometimes the city may make a comprehensive plan change through a development application. And then at that time, really, it's up to the city and the ACHD Commission to decide how they want to move forward. Many collectors have been added to the map or removed in that way.
But, Justin, that's helpful, but it seems to be at odds with what our previous, when the master street map was previously shared with us, where, when those requests don't jive with our policy, our, staff's discretion is to deny those requests. So I guess I'm just really curious, why that bullet, the amendment requested development applications, is on there when there's more to it, when it seems like so much resides on the staff level discretion to make sure that it's matching policy or not, regardless of that development application.
Madam President and members of the commission, if there was any previous communication to the commission related to how the map can be amended as it relates to development, I apologize for any confusion on that. Staff doesn't really have the ability to deny anything through the development process if indeed the city wants it, if it's the desire of the applicant, it's considered at that time. Staff may recommend that it not be included, but if it's something that the city is interested in or the developer, they could bring it in front of the commission and seek that it be included as part of that process.
Well, and that, I mean, Justin, that's really good, but I feel like that's at odds with what we've previously talked about, where, you know, staff presented the master street map. These were the requests by the cities. These were these were denials, right? And then, of course, you just talked about how we had 68 requests, 14 aren't making it through as staff, you know, presenting it. But I feel like that's really at odds with what has been actually happening over this last course. So, I mean, am I just missing a step or?
Well, Madam President, members of the commission, let me walk through some of these today, and I think the word denial, I think if that's been used, I don't remember that. Staff has not recommended they be included at this time in the map. There is always a future opportunity to amend the map. And so this is, and as we walk through these, and we'll go one by one, but I think you'll see that there may be some interpretation here that staff is looking at, and maybe the commission disagrees, and that's great, and that's why we're walking through.
Sure. And my questions are mostly just about, you know, because you talked about the history, and
Right.
and that's the essence of my questions is, as I've experienced it in the last 9 months or so, it's a little bit different from how you're describing it. So that's the essence of what my questions are about, but I'm happy to continue to go through your next slides.
And I think that's what we're doing today, right? We had
Correct.
some requests that were in question, and so we're going one by one to address those and get the input from the commission and move forward. So hopefully that'll help.
Madam President, may I ask a question before we go through each one of the items? A couple questions, actually. Thank you, Madam President and Justin. So the two buckets, and you have to admit sometimes when you read the language of a statute or a regulation or a policy, they're not always the model of crystal clarity. And so in this case, that's it. From my perspective, the case with this policy 3111. But the way in which you've described it is there's a bucket over here, which is through development. So a developer applies, there's something happening right now, there's an application, it's moving, and things need to change. So that's the bucket here. And then the bucket over here is a significant change to the comp plan, right? So those are the two buckets, the way in which the staff is interpreting the two ways in which the master street map amendments are then brought to the commission, right? So, but the cities, and what I've learned is they do lots of other planning. Boise City went through a very comprehensive transportation action plan that developed plans for neighborhoods based upon land uses. That wouldn't qualify as the comp plan, right? That's another plan. They also do neighborhood plans. They were very instrumental and involved, as we were, in Blueprint for Good Growth. So there's other plans, but those would not be considered over here in this bucket, which we say has to be a change in their comp plan. Is that correct?
Madam President, members of Commissioner Hanson, yes, if it's, as we read the policy doesn't really speak to those other documents.
Yeah.
Now, some of those documents are incorporated into the city's comprehensive plan by reference. Whether those other plans specifically call out amendments to the master street map, I'm familiar with many of these plans. It would be rare that would occur. For example, the Transportation Action Plan from the City of Boise, we have a city leadership here today. I don't want to speak for them, but I don't believe it specifically calls out like an amendment to the map. It may establish a vision or a broader policy framework that they want to, review their transportation system under, but it's not directly connected in that way to the master street map.
Okay, yeah, and that's, I think, and you saw a copy probably, I shared one of, I'd like to see some significant changes to clarify the policy moving forward, since at the very beginning it talks about its purpose as a guiding document projecting out where the jurisdictions in Ada County are planning to go, and then what the network would look like, and so that I think it really needs some updated language to make that clearer, so that we can move on that without creating this tension in interpreting how the statute or the policy applies. So I proposed that, and I appreciate President May. She did get back to me and said, we are committed to moving forward on discussing changes to policy, because of course we're the policymakers. And that's what I like about it. When we bump into issues on policy, it's our job not to ignore it, but to fix it. In this policy, it does talk about really this concept that we have a hierarchy, that there's sort of hierarchy of, principal arterials, mobility corridors as a subset of principal arterials and minor arterials, collectors, and local streets. So there's this hierarchy. But in the case that it doesn't always work that way because of the geography and others where you don't have that hierarchy. And I think we're going to raise, that issue's been raised in the Barber Valley, where that hierarchy doesn't exist. There are no collector roads where we're talking about. There's what's been identified as the arterial, and then there's local roads. So it's like a pyramid the middle section's been cut out. So dealing with that gives us the complexity of, there's the theory of a hierarchy of moving from the major through corridors as you get closer and closer with to where people are going to be on the streets and businesses, that you then change the typology. But because of geography, there's places that doesn't exist. So I just want to point that out, and that's a really good reason why we can't get tripped up on the language. It says we got to change it because of this, because the hierarchy that it doesn't exist. We're not going to build a whole network of collector roads into the foothills. Those foothills are protected, so all there are just a couple of small local roads adjacent to an arterial. I just want to point that. That's a really significant internal inconsistency, and that's why I think, and I mentioned when we met before, why I'm very much in favor of the request by both the city and the neighborhood association to change that typology.
Thank you. All right, back to you.
All right, commissioners, well, let's go ahead and jump into these. There's it's not all of our partners were there discrepancies. It was just 3. We had one with the City of Eagle, which we've spoken to them, and I would say there's different levels of interest in these requests. I would say the City of Eagle's interest in this is relatively low. It's not a major conflict, but this is Island Wood, there between River Chase to the Three Cities River Crossing. And
Madam President, can I ask a quick question?
Commissioner Hanson.
How can we make a judgment on whether the city's interest is high or low? Presumably if they asked for it, they're interested in it. So is it really our place to say, well, we're going to make a value judgment on whether your interest is high or low? If it's low, they're not going to ask for it.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, very fair question. That was based on a conversation we had with city staff. So we are constantly in communication with them. So coming up and preparing for this work session, I wanted to make sure that we had clear communication with the city staff. And we talked to them about this, and I was just representing what city staff had indicated to us. And I apologize if that was done poorly, but that's what I meant.
Madam President and Justin, wouldn't we just request that they withdraw the request? It seems to me we should either have requests or we don't have requests by the time it reaches the commission, instead of, these are sort of, they like these, and these they really like.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, yes, I would agree. We asked if they were willing to do that, and they said no. So there's a nuance, right, in how we approach this, but here we are. So this is the first one. You can see this is a request to basically upgrade what is currently a residential street to a collector street in the vicinity of what would be the future Three Cities River crossing. You can see there we go. Previous development, there's been development that has been approved in this area, And this street right here has front on housing. And so the request from the city of Eagle to upgrade this to a collector from what is today a local street, which local streets are not indicated on the master street map at all, only collectors and above. We thought, looking at this request and based on previous development approvals, we didn't feel like it met the threshold to upgrade it at this time. And it's unlikely that the residents living along that street would support this. We haven't reached out to them directly, but it's unlikely that they would, based on the makeup of this neighborhood and the land use context. So that's the first one.
These are numbers on the this list that you gave us.
Correct.
Is there a way of referencing those numbers?
Yeah, this is number one. Let me make sure.
Number 17. Well, that you put Boise and Eagle.
Yeah, for the purposes of this presentation, let me see. Denton could probably tell me if they do. This is just the
Island Rivers 3 crossing. This looks like number 19.
Okay, yeah. So in the table provided, we have a discrepancy between, they're all there, they just don't match the numbers. That's our fault.
It's number 19 on here.
Yeah, it's number one here, the names match correctly. But here you go. This is from the city of Eagle. So that's the first one. So as of right now, in the current map, this is not included as something that we believe is appropriate to put in at this time at the staff level.
So Madam President and Justin, but the city has land use plans and presumably it represents these neighborhoods and they're asking for, and so there's a direct connection to their plans for this area. I don't see why we wouldn't go with it. And then if the city wants to change it back, but at this point it projects out what the city planners are saying. This is how we'd like this to be planned out. And if they don't like it in the future, they can come back to us and change that. Well, we're not a land use agency, so why would we go in and say, well, maybe those neighbors may not like this, maybe this might not fit real well, but that's not our role. It's just our role is to use this as a guide, and this is what the city wants to happen at this point.
Mr. Price.
If I may, Madam President, Commissioner Steve Price, General Counsel for the record. Commissioner Hanson, Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, you raise an interesting point that I think is clarified under the Local Land Use Planning Act. And as part of the Local Land Use Planning Act, there are several components that are required to be included within the comprehensive plan. And one of those is a transportation component. And in that particular provision, the obligation of the Highway District is to meet with the cities and review their the transportation component for any area within their city. But at the end of the day, the Highway District retains the authority as to where those locations go. So the issue, statutorily, we have the final authority about where that goes. The other issue that's interesting under the Local Land Use Planning Act is there's a future acquisition map provision. And the master street map has really been developed in coordination with our partnering agencies on that front. The real purpose has always been that if we have a future project along the transportation corridor and a development comes in and is applying to the city and it impacts the roadway, then we have the ability to go in and do an early condemnation to work with the developer or the person to acquire it. And that is really the purpose of the future acquisition map. We've kind of taken that and worked with the cities to come up with the master street map. We still like that because it gives us the ability that as we look out and we get future developments, we still have that opportunity for the corridor preservation that may be impacted by any future developments. But at the end of the day, the local highway jurisdiction gets to determine scope and width and everything in terms of the roads, and that is identified within the comprehensive plan of the Local Land Use Planning Act. And I'm happy to provide that statute to all of you so you can see the language.
So Madam President and Mr. Price, so the Local Land Use Planning Act does apply to the Ada County Highway District. I understood it didn't apply to us, and that the Local Land Use Planning Act actually applies to the cities, and they're held accountable to live up to that statutory requirement.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, we've been through lots of litigation. You're absolutely right. The Local Land Use Planning Act, in terms of authorities, does not apply to the Ada County Highway District. It only applies to cities and counties.
Right.
However, the statute does limit the authority over transportation when there's a local highway jurisdiction.
So, Madam President,
I can pull it up and read it.
Yeah, no, Madam President and Mr. Price, I get that this creates some conflict that needs to be ironed out. So if the city of Eagle believes that connectivity is really, really, really important in this area, because as you can see, you got the river to the south and you got a state highway to the north, and there's no other way for connectivity, that they're planning out and thinking ahead. It doesn't obligate, because even reading through the existing language, it doesn't obligate us, this agency or presumably the land use agency, to actually condemn or purchase or build. It just says this is a planning guide. And at this point, the city wants, in this case, I'm assuming, wants some better connectivity with a collector road between two natural obstacles, and that it's going to be used as a collector road in any case. So we would like it to be designated that on the master street map. So I don't quite understand why we would get in trouble for identifying on a master street map as a planning guide under law to say this is what they want. Now, presumably as they get closer and the citizens of Eagle want them to change their mind, they can come back to us and we'll say, okay, we haven't purchased it or we haven't built it out yet. Then that's what we'll change it, because circumstances have now changed and the city has decided its land use priorities are a little different in that area now.
Well, Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I wasn't raising that to say that the commission can't do what it wants in this realm. I just didn't want there to be any misunderstanding about what our authority is under the Local Land Use Planning Act, which is the subject you reviewed. If the commission wishes to go ahead and honor the wish, that's fine, but you also need to know that it may impact when we get development applications in terms of the width of the road, whether we're going to be doing speed mitigation and those kind of things, because when you go to a collector, then there's different standards than a local street. That's your call, and I'm not saying anything different than that. All I'm saying is, at the end of the day, we have the final authority as we're responsible for the transportation within Ada County. You most certainly, when we get requests from the cities and you want to amend the map, the master street map has been drafted to give you extensive authority in that front.
So Madam President and Mr. Price, I think that we're not that far apart. The only question is that if after raising these concerns, which is really good, the staff raises this with the City of Eagle staff that may or may not have evaluated it in that context.
Right.
And the city still says, no, this is what we want, and they don't withdraw it, and they persist in it. It seems to me we have an obligation to support our land use partners as they move forward. And so saying, well, we disagree we can send it to them and think about it some more. But if they insist, it seems to me that they're held responsible, because the development applications also go to them, and they have the power under KMST and under law to impose conditions related to transportation on those developments. So,
well, through us, yes. Yeah. But what you're arguing is, or making the point is, you're doing it out of you're trying to coordinate with the cities on their wishes. And what I'm trying to tell you is that's great, and you have the authority to do that. But at the end of the day, this agency is responsible for the road system under the law and the local impact fee statute. And you brought that up, and I thought there was some confusion, and so I felt it was necessary to clarify that. Other than that, I think we're kind of cross-talking.
No, I agree, and I think that points out why I think the reading of this policy really creates confusion, and it needs real clear amendments to make it possible for cities to use our expertise and to understand the role that we play when we change a typology and put it on the map, and then future developers can count on that as they come in and look at doing development in a corridor. And we can and should do that. But the city ultimately, under the Local Land Use Planning Act and its other authority, has the final say on what those neighborhoods and businesses, land uses are going to be about. So.
Well, we have a lot of say, and please don't be confused, when it comes to a proposed platted subdivision. KMST does not necessarily limit ACHD's authority. We have plat signing authority. We can deny developments, and we can also require that they meet. And if the city doesn't support that, that's fine. Right. But we won't sign the plat, and guess what? The development doesn't go anywhere. So we both have this kind of odd little branches of power. But again, we're cross-talking over each other. Most certainly happy to look at your proposed amendments and work with the commission going forward. Yep. No problem on that.
No, I agree with it. And since this says right at the very beginning, this is basically a planning tool, is a long range, look ahead. So let's not use this as a way of sort of presupposing what that development's going to look like when a developer eventually comes in and does it.
And thank you, members of the commission. I'll move forward. And as staff's intention today was to just clarify why we were not recommending to include these at this time, and then at commission discretion.
Very good.
The next grouping is for Garden City, and I'll run through these. This is kind of the broad map, and I'll run through each of them so we can see where ACHD staff's current position, and then take commission direction as needed. The first one is Carlton Bay Drive, and the city has requested that there be a connection on Carlton Bay between basically extending Carlton Bay to Ulmer. Through previous development, there has been an assisted living facility constructed directly in the path of this potential roadway. There's also an existing church that exists in this area. And so just looking at this and based on staff's interpretation of the policy, staff didn't feel comfortable including this in the map due to the fact that there's basically the development has already occurred in this area, and it would be difficult for this road to ever be constructed.
So, Madam, go ahead.
Madam President.
Commissioner Pickering.
Justin, so what was the rationale by the city of Garden City for, despite those objections that you've listed, why do they still think that this is important, or why it should be considered?
Once again, Commissioner, it places me in an awkward position to provide rationale on behalf of the city. As I say, we've gone through these, each of them with the cities, and maybe they're just taking a much longer view. I mean, I think that would be the only idea that I have, is that maybe someday, 100 years from now, through some sort of redevelopment action of this assisted living facility, that this street could someday be extended. That's the one justification that I would understand. And I think staff's response to that through these meetings and conversations has been, that's fine. I think we're trying to keep the map consistent with policy, and because a development application went through and the opportunity for that roadway to be extended, which would have been there through that development process, didn't occur at that time, then looking forward, it seems that it's unlikely for that to redevelop.
Well, I think I'm kind of lost with, I tried tracking your different steps that you just listed there. So wait, the Garden City put in a development, so the developer put in an application. Which part of the road was that in? And then did the developer pull that off the table, or was that a Garden City decision? I'm just kind of, could you provide more detail to that point?
Well, I'm just stating the fact that when this development was approved and went through the process, a road was not required, and this development isn't that old.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it went through, no road was required through this area. And therefore, when staff looks at this, we go, if a road would have been there, it would have been through that development. And it's unlikely that this is going to redevelop anytime in the near or long term.
Well, Justin, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And all of us know how fast Garden City is developing and redeveloping. And so I feel like, and that land is really precious and expensive. And so it's not, I feel uncomfortable just assuming that it's just going to stay that way for the foreseeable future, to your point. Things could change. Developers could go in and, need that road or whatever. So I feel like that, just similar to Commissioner Hansen's point, that although I totally understand the staff findings and the concerns with, right-of-way not preserved, all of those bits and pieces, but I know that we do lots of things all the time and have done it in the past where we've acquired also we've tried to make it work when things pop up. And so I feel like we should, again, consider to let the city drive those decisions and approve what they are requesting.
Madam President, just
Okay.
follow question with Justin. Well, it's a good work session. I think it's real important because land uses change. And this doesn't, by designating it, doesn't say either the city has to somehow make this change, but in the future, private property owners are going to say, I'm going to change something. And so they're entitled to know what the vision of the city is, the long-term vision of the city is. And so this private property owner is entitled to have that knowledge. And if they don't have that knowledge from a long-range projection on a map, then they might move forward in spending money on a development plan that doesn't include that. And it's inconsistent with what the city wants to do. And this city is not even in a position to start negotiating if they don't have a projected plan idea that we would like connectivity. Again, this is a very similar issue. You got the river, you got State Street, and they want something that in the future, when it redevelops, and I just point out the west end of Boise is all being redeveloped, and there's a new street that's even going in. Boise's going to put in a new street that somehow got taken out with the land use, and now it's coming back. And so, but it was presumably on the map, and so we somehow have been able to say, yep, land uses are going to change. So doesn't it make sense if the long-range vision of the city, and I know you're saying this is what it exists today, it's the current land use, but the long-range vision of the city is if the land use changes, if that owner wants to do something else, they no longer, this is no longer profitable, this business, they want to do this kind of business, the city is entitled to say, we would like this kind of connectivity to go through the property.
Madam President, Commissioners, once again, at your discretion, how this is interpreted. We're providing staff's interpretation, and it's certainly at your discretion how we look at this. I would say that once again, what we're doing is basically saying we don't believe the time is right now to amend the map. There may be a future comprehensive plan change. There may be further information provided that would give us a reason to modify this, but at this time those conditions do not exist. And when I say comprehensive plan change, I'm talking about additional density, something else that happens that would trigger some need in this area.
Madam President, again, Steve Price, General Counsel. I think several of the commissioners were here when we came through on a development application for the church, which is down in the lower right. And at that time, we had tried to preserve the corridor for that road extension. We faced all kinds of pushback from the church. And I even think at the time the city acknowledged that. And by the way, that was prior to the assisted living center being developed. So it really kind of and we did try. We tried to get the corridor. I'm not sure it was in that exact location. I think it was off of what's that? Lake Island. I think it was going to come something like through here. Yep. And in any event, in working with the city and the church, some of you, maybe you can remember it, but it came to a screeching halt, both from the city, and I don't know why the city's requesting it. I think maybe it's in a new location, but this has a history, and we're happy anytime you have any questions, we most certainly can dig that up for you. But I didn't want that to escape your mind that we had actually tried. We felt that it was good planning, but Garden City approved the assisted living, and we were unable to exact or acquire any right-of-way from the church. And I don't think was willing to condemn the property from the church to preserve that corridor.
Madam President.
Commissioner Pickering.
So Steve, you just brought up a great point where we, did everything we could to, enable a corridor to be in that neck of the woods. And as I'm understanding the master street map, like this can signal that we can work towards securing a corridor like this when redevelopment does happen. So I feel like if we had, something like this in the master street map, when those discussions were happening, wouldn't that have helped those discussions?
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, it was.
It
was something in working, it wasn't in the master street map, but it was something that the city of Eagle had contacted us about very strongly about trying to preserve that corridor.
You mean Garden City?
Garden City, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I feel like we're talking about different things.
We're cross-talking as well. Look, you have the authority. I'm just trying to give you the history.
I'm just saying, as you described it, though, I feel like that reinforces the fact that this needs to be in the master street map.
Yeah. And just a point of clarity on this one, Carlton Bay Drive is actually a local street, and the connection that was trying to be preserved was a local street connection. And so local streets, once again, do not come on the master street map. And so that's why it wasn't on the master street map at that time.
Well, that's odd. Madam President and Justin, so did you tell the city of Garden City, we don't put local streets on our master street map? So do you want to withdraw this request?
Commissioner, yes, we did.
Okay, and they didn't withdraw the request?
No, Commissioner, they did not.
Seems odd. Okay, but it seems odd because we don't adopt local street configurations on the master street map. We only do collectors and higher typologies, correct?
Madam President, Commissioner, you're correct. That has been the historic position of the Highway District.
Actually.
Madam President.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Thank you. Just one thing, and as Steve was talking, I started to remember more and more about this particular application and discussion years ago. I don't know how this applies too much to some of the other requests, although I do know it does, but I have a personal philosophy about things like this, and I just describe it as the "that ship has sailed" philosophy. And as far as I'm concerned about, I'll call it damage that could be done to the uses of these properties by changing this particular classification is just short of enormous. And so I kind of look at everything we're talking about today through those glasses as well.
Madam President, Commissioners, I'll go ahead and move on.
Yeah, please do.
There are several. There's similar circumstances on all of them, and as once again, the commission has broad discretion. Staff is not here to try and convince anyone of anything. We're here to try and explain our how we did our analysis, where we got to where we are, and then seek commission direction. Ultimately, this is an action item today, and so the commission will have ample opportunity to provide direction. So here is the next connection that has been requested. And this is basically from Horseshoe Bend connecting over to Arnie Lane. And I do just want to highlight, similar to the previous request, there is a platted subdivision that has been approved in this area that did not include the connection between these roadways. And so once again, after looking at this, staff thought the likelihood of a single family home subdivision with platted streets being redeveloped to include a connection over to this other street was unlikely. And there's also on this specific area, this section of road, the HOA owns what is commonly referred to as a spite strip, and that can be derogatory. It's not intended that way, but they own a piece of land outside of the right-of-way that would make a connection difficult because ACHD would have to, or the developer would have to acquire that land to make the road connection. And so that is one of the issues also that exists in this circumstance.
So, Madam President and Justin.
Commissioner Hanson.
So we do have a policy, and we're on connectivity. We really want to see connectivity, because when we don't have good connectivity, local roads dump a lot of traffic concentrated on the arterials. And so, again, it seems to me that we can balance the policy of connectivity with the policy of, and I assume they're asking for a collector in this case, right? Not a local.
The request, Commissioners, is for a collector street.
Okay, so it applies to Collector Street.
Yep.
And then, okay, seems to me if that's the direction they wanted to go, and I know it's platted, but it hasn't been built yet, right?
Well, thank you, Commissioners. I did also want to note, it would basically be a reclassification of this section of roadway, which today, when it was approved through development, was not approved as a collector street and does have front-on housing. And I believe this is a section of Arnie Lane. And so that would be basically classifying the road up from what it was approved as through development.
Madam President, Commissioners, again, Steve Price, General Counsel. I have some history with this particular development. It has been constructed in terms of the road network. It's got lots for sale. The interesting thing about it is that they were required to provide secondary access, which this is the main access. They got a secondary access, which was a stub here. Unfortunately, this is the extension of the Greenbelt. Remember, Garden City requested that the Greenbelt get rerouted, and this isn't the best, but it's my understanding, and I can't really see it, that there was going to be some effort on this point to bring either emergency access or something to, and I believe this is a collector, isn't it, Justin? No, it's not. Okay, it's not. But there was an effort to try and exact an improvement over this ditch. It's not a comfortable ditch, it's a big ditch. And we had explored that at the time, but this is what is approved and it is constructed.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Moving on to the next request is a collector in the vicinity of the golf course along State Street. This is formerly the Plantation Golf Course. So this is an interesting one where you have private streets involved here. The streets in this area, I believe the street on this side is a private street. The street on this side is a public street. And so you have a proposed collector in an area between a private street and a local street. That is complicated for various reasons. And once again, this area, we haven't seen a development application for this area. We anticipate that there will be some type of local street connectivity through this area if indeed it does redevelop. We haven't seen anything yet. It's hard for us to see how a collector street would connect like this one shows. There may be some need for a collector if it's coming off of State Street, but when we looked at this, we felt like at the time, we just don't have enough information to add this to the map. And because we know there's active redevelopment plans here, we felt like the development process would allow for the conversation to occur in a more transparent way, especially considering the impact that it could have on the existing homes that surround the golf course. So that was staff's interpretation of this request. Here's another one, similar situation where you have basically this Lake Harbor Lane, this one right here, this is a private street. This is not a public street. This is a public street here, Plantation Lane, and the connection between those two, let's see, there we go, that's a blow up of this area, would require, once again, kind of a reconfiguration of what is that existing street, Plantation, or it's North Harbor Lane, that one. And then trying to get that over through the development process, there was no right-of-way preserved in this area, and connecting a local street and having it terminate into what is a private street isn't consistent with ACHD's policies.
So, Madam President and Justin, so wouldn't it seem to me that the request is just incomplete, that their goal is to ultimately connect to another public street? And it may never happen in our lifetimes, but in the meantime, in case that does develop, a property owner buys significant amount around there, the vision of the city is this is how we want connectivity and traffic flow to happen. Again, it looks like it's got serious constraint issues because of the location of a state highway and the river. I think that's at the right place. So just because it may not happen while you and I are still alive doesn't mean it isn't a reflection of the current vision of the city's land use vision for that area, correct?
The city's vision is represented, Commissioner, on the map. So that's what we're here to make a final determination on. Similar situation in the same location where this network of streets that goes through this development is private, and there's a connection shown from this public street to this private street network just south of this area. And once again, whether these would be really classified as collectors, I think is in question. They're much more likely would be local street connections, which would be available through the redevelopment process if that were to ever occur. Here's kind of an interesting area of Garden City, moving to a separate spot within the just south of the Chinden area. This is basically a request for collector streets within this network. In short, there really would be local street connections. There's nothing about this area. Goodall is not a collector street today. There are no existing collectors within this area, and it's unlikely that you would need a collector network in an area like this that's so constrained. Local streets would probably be sufficient. And so because these are local streets, or would likely be local streets, staff didn't feel like they would be appropriate to include in the map because we don't have any other local streets on the map.
So, Madam President, and quick one, Justin, because we can't determine what ITD is going to do on their highways, and the big issue on Chinden and on Highway 44 is the issues of safety and connectivity, that this is a reasonable way in which the city says this is how we can deal with something over which we have no jurisdiction or power.
Yeah, Commissioner, I I mean, the city can have a vision for this area. They could do a sub-area land use plan. They could establish a local street network completely separate from the master street map, and ACHD would be glad to participate in this process. I think on this specific request, it is this appropriate for the master street map, which does not have local streets? The city identifies these as collectors, and staff's interpretation of that is it's unlikely they would operate as collector streets.
And Madam President, Justin, so this doesn't have a sub-area plan?
No, it does not that I'm aware of. No.
Or neighborhood plan?
No. Well, there's a neighborhood plan that ACHD has for Garden City, but there's no land use plan specific to the redevelopment of this area. Yeah.
Madam President.
Mr. Pickering.
Justin, can you share a little bit more about why you don't think it would be ever a collector street?
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, really good question. So due to the size of this area and the existing development pattern, we just see, even if this were to increase density, we don't see, because of the way this is laid out, that you would need a collector street running parallel to Chinden. Chinden operates, pretty well in this area, and we could see a pretty good local street network, especially if it's gridded, as they would probably want. And when you have a gridded local street network, the need for a collector is not necessary in most situations. Like this. The other situations it may be, but this situation probably not.
I hear you, but I just want to push back on a couple of your points because, we don't know what development is going to look like, in so much of Garden City. And folks, and to your point, things are becoming more and more dense, but I mean, we know how terrible Chinden is in terms of an accessibility, a safety standpoint, right? And I think, obviously this isn't reducing, I think a local street isn't, having it maintain and continuing to be a local street doesn't take away from, potentially what it being a collector, but I'm still not kind of understanding outside of the actual land use, like the size of this section, like what else why wouldn't it be a collector?
Well, the decision, through the development process as it comes to whether a street is classified as a collector or a local, a lot of that happens through, if there is a TIS, it happens through that process. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is at the discretion of the developer who is looking to, in an area like this, it would likely need to be a wholesale redevelopment to really get any type of major change in this area. And through that, is it possible that a developer would come forward with a collector street in this area? I guess it is, Commissioner. I'm just saying, based on our analysis of what is happening out here and the specific request of Garden City, we viewed these more as local streets rather than collectors.
Thank you.
So, Madam President, and Justin, just to follow up, then what you said is this a discretion of the developer, but isn't it the city would like developers to come forward with a vision for development that's consistent with their vision, which includes a collector in this constrained area? So isn't it appropriate for the city to say, this is how we envision this? We want a collector to connect the dense area, because they're pinned in right there in the hill there. And people will use locals as collectors if we don't designate them and design them that way, is because people will do it. So we would like to project out and not leave it up to the discretion of a future developer that comes in and says, well, I want to make sure the city wants to make sure that there's this collector system. The other question is, doesn't this violate the whole hierarchy notion that then don't you want to have hierarchy between this huge principal arterial, a state highway, and then what will be a future small block, presumably a network of local streets that has a collector street that goes through it? Isn't that consistent with another part of the policy that says this is really a hierarchical system?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I think much of what you're discussing would be best fleshed out through some sort of sub-area land use plan where they could really lay that out more clearly. The request, which we have to review kind of at its face value isn't supported by that. And so we're just here. There could be, yes, a broader vision here. We just didn't feel at this time like we had enough information.
Okay.
So that's just kind of where we landed.
And you told them we'd love to see a sub-area plan for this.
We are always glad to work with our city partners on any type of sub-area planning they want to pursue. It really helps us understand the vision rather than, comprehensive plans. They are broad, and they are typically just colors associated with areas on a map. Most of the time there's not a lot more than just that. There are associated policies for sure that can impact some of these decisions, but there's an area of interpretation.
Well, I like that, because I like that you're now saying it's not just the comp plan. It could be a sub-area, a smaller sub-area plan, another plan that we could look at. And our policy probably needs to change in order to incorporate those other plans that the city would be developing.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, it's typical when a city goes through a sub-area planning process that they incorporate it into their comprehensive plan by reference.
Yeah.
So I think the policy covers it. It just hasn't happened in this specific scenario. This is an interesting one where there is the Garden City's desire to show a connection through this is the fairground property and the horse racing track. This is one where there is actually active planning efforts occurring now, which have not been completed. And so staff was thinking that the inputs into the master street map would be probably more appropriate after some of that planning has matured a little bit, rather than include it in this way. There may be different interpretation on that, but that's certainly the case. We do have, I think, someone from the county here. I don't know if the county's taken an official position on this, but once again, at the commission's discretion, this is one of area of interpretation.
This is county request or Garden City request?
No, this is a Garden City request. The county has not requested this.
Madam President.
Commissioner Pickering?
Yeah, Justin, I think that's, an interesting conundrum. It's like the chicken or the egg, and I'm wondering if this is, Garden City's, again, I'm just speculating, if this is their attempt to have some element of, I don't want to say control, but, input on what the county does decide with that property. Has there ever been a road like this that cuts through that property? Like, what's the historical context?
Madam President, members of the commission, so this area has kind of a unique transportation vibe going. The parking lot and some of the roadway networks that exist within this massive county property, it has its own kind of circulation pattern. Much of that through any type of large-scale redevelopment would be a major part of the redevelopment process. The network, anyone who redevelops this en masse is going to have to look at access into and through the area. And so, once again, this is just an area of adding a line like this through the map. This is certainly possible. It's at the commission's discretion. Staff felt it may be a little premature based on some of the conversations occurring right now.
Thanks, Justin.
Yep.
And that makes sense, I think, since it's going through that redesign.
So moving on now, we got through Garden City, moving into City of Boise. There's kind of two areas we'll talk about in the City of Boise. We have some representatives from the city here today. I'll do my best to go through these. There's the other area, Warm Springs, which we know we've discussed at great length, is also going to be part of this. So this is a kind of a unique request where the city is, this is within the city's area of impact. I don't believe this area has been annexed into the city yet. There's a collector request basically from Amity extending down here to this street, which I believe is Highlander, or is it it's Highlander, yeah. So connecting into this network. And this is an interesting one where staff looked at this based on the current development plans and other things in this area. I think there's a feeling of, will this area ever really redevelop under current city and county policies? That's a question. Those policies could change. Once again, based on staff's review of policy, we didn't see a need to include this at this time. We think there's some more work that could be done out here to get better information, but once again, at the commission's discretion.
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yeah, I think when we talk about a project like this, before we add it to, make changes and that because of who it's going to impact, that we allow for some input.
Similar situation here. This is a rapidly changing area. As you know, the city has approved major developments out along this corridor. ACHD has made substantial investments in this area, and the city is kind of recommending this collector network be included. I think staff's basic position here is we'd like to see maybe a more specific area plan or land use plan laid out in this area. It's so wide open. We'd like to see that before we put lines on a map. I think staff is wide open to the idea of collectors. It's just a matter of timing and what is the information we need to put that in.
So, Madam President and Justin, doesn't that seem like a really, really good thing to do, is to initially put something on the map, because both ACHD, that supports collector networks, and the city of Boise, that wants to see development in this area with a collector network, both support that idea, but they haven't got down to the level of exactly where those routes are going to be. So wouldn't it make sense, since this is a long-range planning document, to project to the world that the city wants to see something here? It might not be this configuration, and since the policy clearly says in the notes, this might not be the actual alignment, it might look different. It just makes sense to put it on there if they're requesting it, so that developers and neighbors and others who are potentially investing in that area aren't surprised later on when, oh yeah, we've both been thinking about this, but we just never did get around to putting it on the map. But I think we've done that. I mean, with respect to what we've talked about with Micron, yeah, we need another collector, some sort of network from that area to make sure for emergency purposes there's other access. But we have no idea where the exact location is going to be, but we'll put it on the map, and the future development, future planning, etc., will determine the exact location and the exact configuration, whether it's a straight line road like that, which will clearly need some traffic calming on it, or it has other features that could prevent speed.
Certainly, at the commission's discretion. Number 12 is the addition of a roundabout. On the master street map, there is a layer that identifies future roundabout locations. This one is, from a staff perspective, this is where we just kind of go to the record and we look at the development applications and all of the work that has been done in an area, and we review the record and we see if this is consistent or not. There have been various specific area plans performed in this area. There's been a lot of work done in this area, and none of those plans have ever indicated a roundabout at this location. And the right-of-way was not dedicated by the developer for a roundabout at this location. And so staff's basic interpretation of this request is it's just not supported by the previous development approvals. Once again, staff didn't feel comfortable adding it at the commission's discretion.
Oh, and that, Madam President and Justin, thank you, because I know the history of that area. I live near there, and I have asked about that a lot, and that decisions were made early on when ACHC said, no, we don't want this kind of configuration, so they dropped it. And so the roundabout was built on the west end, but not on the east end of that road, even long before the bypass was built. And so now, of course, development's finishing there. So wouldn't it make sense to just put it on the map now, but we won't have the money to do it. We won't have the ability to do it. It would take a huge amount. But at least in the future, if there are resources available, there is this contemplation that the functionality of that intersection, which all the neighbors point out, that is a very dangerous intersection in the way it's designed. It's very difficult to make left turns there. and for pedestrians to cross, which is why the pedestrian crossings have been bumped over to the right or to the east. Wouldn't it make sense just to designate it on the map? Because I understand from the history of that development, those early discussions did involve discussions of a roundabout there, but that was removed so that the development could move forward with all the other stuff that they wanted.
And Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, at your discretion. You know, we're just reading the news today in some ways.
So, yeah, there's a fuller history on that.
This is in the area of Columbia Road with a connection proposed out to Highway 21. Once again, this is an area where there's a lot of things going on, especially with the recent announcements associated with Micron and other things in this area. There's only really a few landholders out here who control almost all of the land. The city would like us to indicate they're asking for actually an arterial connection connecting off of Highway 21 to Columbia Road within this vicinity. Staff, after looking at this, we felt like we didn't have enough information or any type of development or traffic analysis or amendment to the comprehensive plan that would really support this at this time. Once again, this is staff's interpretation. There's a lot of topography and other challenges in this area related to Highway 21 and access down to Highway 21 off of what is basically a bench. Also, any type of arterial access at this location would require some type of coordination with Idaho Transportation Department, who controls access to the state highway at this location. It would also significantly change the network that exists out there if we did include a signal, for example, and a cross-street connection. It changes the potential amount of traffic and access that is then provided into the Grand Forest, Lake Forest, Columbia Village area. So there's a lot of unknowns. We felt like this would be better decided through a large-scale development out here, which is likely due to the land holdings. So that was kind of staff's interpretation of this.
Madam President.
Go ahead.
Commissioner McKinney.
Justin, yeah, just a few weeks ago, I believe, didn't we see the proposed development that Micron is planning? How does this fit with that?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, everything Micron is doing is basically south of Columbia Road, and this area to the north of Columbia Road. And I may not be perfect on this, but it's a different landowner. It's basically J.R. Simplot Company and Micron own much of the area out here. And so this is just one of those areas where it's likely that some type of connection, whether it be arterial, collector, I don't know. We would need to look at that through a large-scale development to see what was appropriate. It would also give the neighbors through the development process a chance to weigh in on that. And once again, this is an area of interpretation. How far do we want to be in front of that? What is our intent with these lines on the map? Totally understand that, and staff is just providing you with our analysis at this time.
Yep. So, Madam President and Justin, knowing the neighbors there, they're concerned today that the secondary access doesn't exist, and if anything happens on Columbia Road that causes that to be blocked, it's very difficult. So, and especially since the development of the Micron facility sort of precipitates the opportunity for development, doesn't it just like totally make sense that Boise would want to make sure that everybody knows somewhere, somehow we're going to have a connectivity, a secondary connection between Columbia Road and the state highway. What it looks like, the traffic analysis and the topography and the landowners. We'll get to those because this is a long-range planning document. This doesn't resolve those. That's what is resolved down the road. So doesn't this really totally make sense, knowing that they can't develop further any more residential property in that Painted Ridge area until they have a secondary access? And yet here's a huge employer whose employees might want to live there, but they can't because they can't have that secondary access to the state highway. So there's all kinds of things that are totally a no-brainer. Okay, well, let's somehow in this process. And it might be expensive, but it looks like that would be entirely impact fee eligible, correct? But I assume that's why they're asking for it to be arterial, because we say collectors aren't impact fee eligible.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I don't know if impact fee eligibility played into the City of Boise's request. For it to be added into our capital improvements plan, that would be required before it was impact fee eligible.
Right,
but
right.
This would have to be something
But
added.
This is the first step. Yeah.
Adding it to the master street map would be a.
Thank you.
Finally, this is the request to reclassify Warm Springs Avenue from Eckert to State Highway 21 as a 3-lane residential collector. It's already designated for 3 lanes within the master street map. Once again, this section of roadway has been identified in previous specific area plans as part of the City of Boise's development process. This has always been, one of the sticking points is that staff is always using the interpretation of what are the previous plans, what are the documents say, and none of those documents reference this as a collector street. Also, staff's view of a street like this with its configuration, its access to a state highway, its direct connectivity into what is largely a developed and residential area. Staff believes this is a reasonable roadway to be classified as a residential arterial, but I'll stop there with staff's comments. I know there's a lot of public feedback that has been received on this, and ultimately I know the commission is interested in making a determination on this.
Thank you.
So, Madam President and Justin, there's sort of 2 ways to approach it. One, you can say, let's change our policy on arterials. And by saying this is a residential arterial, we can take access off of it. We can have front-on housing. We can have these kind of things. Because as you see, there's a steep hills on one side and a river and a park on the other. So, but the problem is, we don't do those things typically on arterials. And so we'd have to waive, and those things don't get waived because we've defined it as an arterial. And we don't do traffic calming on arterials. So there's lots of things in the arterial policy that have to change. An easier way of doing it is to reclassify it as a collector. It's still the same width, which seems to me you still can drive on it. It's 30 miles an hour. And the idea is people shouldn't be driving faster than that because there's no other way for the residents who live on the one side to access the river on the other side. So there's lots and lots of crossing back and forth. So it seems to me we accomplish the same thing by calling it a collector. People can still drive through it at 30 miles an hour, go through and get to if they choose to get to their destination on the other side of Barber Valley using that, but they just have to do it at we can design, or we can design with the city and the neighborhood some traffic calming in order to ensure people are only going 30 miles an hour. And that was the intent when the state vacated that and invested enormous amounts of money in building the high bridge and connecting Highway 21 across the river to Federal Way and the interstate, which is a faster way, more direct way, less impact on neighborhood way of getting from the entrance to the valley to locations in downtown Boise and points west. So it seems to me they accomplished the same thing. We either change the arterial policy or we just waive and say, call this a collector, functions the same way, take your access off of it and you'll be fine. Doesn't that make sense?
Well, Commissioner, I appreciate all your feedback. We're here today to seek the direction of the commission. So what we've done in an attempt to try and assist the commission in making a decision is we've numbered these requests. As I stated earlier, I want to make it very clear, as of right now, None of these requests have been included in the master street map that's been drafted. If the commission so chooses today to add some of these in, we're glad to do that, and we would bring it back to you for a formal adoption, probably on your consent agenda, because we've had the large conversation today. But we await commission's direction, and certainly up to the commission on how you'd like to proceed. But I think for staff's benefit, it would be good to have some type of motion associated with this and some type of vote so that we have clarity and we're able to move forward.
And Justin, we could do that as a group and make a motion, and if there's one or two that we want to remain off, then we would just state that in the motion, right? We're not going to go
Madam
through and
President,
make
Commissioners,
all these different motions.
Whoever makes the motion, you could kind of do a vote-a-rama, or you could just kind of seek consensus. Ultimately, that's up to your process.
Yeah, I like that one.
Good question.
Okay.
So,
Commissioner
Madam
Hanson.
President and Justin, you had said one of them, though, is not a request for a collector. It's almost irrelevant because it's a local road. Which one of those is that? Is that number 6? No, that's number 7. Which one is that?
There were several commissioners where ACHD staff had made that determination.
That's the one with the private road. We had two.
3, 4, 6.
Well, they're not asking for a collector. They're asking for a local road.
Well, I think, Madam President, Commissioners, I think Garden City in their language was proposing collectors for all of these.
Oh, they are.
CHD's interpretation and our analysis, the staff interpretation was it's unlikely that they would operate as collectors or be built as collectors. They are local streets. This is just we can't control the city's language. They're going to ask for what.
Okay, so they've, as far as you're concerned, all of Garden City's requests are for collectors.
That is my understanding.
Okay.
Just going back through, I believe that is correct.
5 and 6.
Okay.
Put this up on the screen here.
Madam President?
So, Commissioner McKinney?
Yeah, let me just, with respect to this chart, I am inclined, items 1 through 10, I'm inclined to agree with the staff's conclusion on those, that none of those appear to me to justify modifying the master street map. 11, I believe, does, and the Orchard Street and Lake Hazel Road, proposed project, I guess that it makes sense to put something there. The final 3, 12, 13, and 14, the reclassification of Warm Springs Avenue, I'm torn on that. I can go either way, so I could see reclassifying that as a collector. 12 and 13, yeah, I could see those two. In any case, I don't see 1 through 10. 11 through 14, I'd be willing to say, yeah, maybe those should be included on the master street map.
Madam President?
Okay. Commissioner Goldthorpe?
I don't know who Commissioner McKinney is channeling, but I pretty much agree with everything he said. 11, 12, and 14 especially, I think we should go ahead and change. 13 might be dependent more on what Micron and others want to do first, but I don't see any harm in that either.
I agree with what you were just saying, and with respective to number 13, I think there's still a lot to.
Yeah.
Where'd he go? There you are. Yeah. Let the dust settle a little bit on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Any-
Madam President, just want to comment.
Okay, just one sec. Were you starting to?
I was going to ask if that was a second or not. From the
No,
motion.
if he was, no, I
I
haven't heard a
would
motion.
make that as a motion to change 11, 12, and 14 to what the city wants.
12 and 14. So leave 13 out.
I'd be willing to second that.
11, 12, and 14.
So, Madam, procedurally, that's a substitute motion, Commissioner Goldthorpe?
There
Sure,
wasn't-
if that's what it needs to
There
be.
was no motion.
Previous one wasn't a motion,
Ah,
mine was
okay.
just a comment.
Motion,
All right.
I think, yeah.
Motion.
So we don't have a formal. So are you making
Yes.
a motion?
So,
Is there a second?
Yeah, second.
so we got a
Commissioner
motion on the
McKinney?
table.
All right, we have a motion
Comment.
before us with a second. Further discussion?
Yeah, thank you. So the 4, 5 that I'm most familiar with are the ones Boise is requesting. I'm very familiar with 11, 12, 13, and 14. I'm very, very familiar with the sensitivity of the Painted Ridge neighborhood, and I would really encourage commissioners to include 13. in yours because of that concern and the opportunity we have when we build arterials to put in the multi-use path adjacent to it. We just finished approving a whole plan for, the scoping. We really liked it last week on Columbia Village. And if you look at that, that's a connecting point to the bike path, bike and pedestrian facilities in Columbia Village. So that they don't have to go down Technology Way, the real busy one by Micron. They, in the future, would be an arterial that has a separate multi-use path that would get it to Columbia Village, and they could then access all the network that we are making a huge investment in to the north of State Highway 21. And that's why it makes sense. You put it on the map. We don't know exactly where it's going to be, but things are moving over there when some entity as big as Micron. And so I would hope you would include that in yours. In any case, I would actually include all 5 of Boise's requests. And then what I'm going to do is defer to Commissioner Pickering and find out, because they're the ones I'm not as familiar with. Those are areas in which she is much more familiar with. I don't have a problem with Garden City saying in the future. Now, our notes, because we have a whole system of notes associated with the master street map, can easily say, we don't anticipate that this will happen until significant redevelopment because of past development patterns and things that have been approved. But this is the current vision of the city of Garden City. I have no problem with approving and putting on the master street map the request of our partner agency. The reason they're not in there is because we're making some judgments about what the current system looks like and what it might look like in the near future. And Garden City presumably is looking towards the long-range future in its fairly constrained environment as to how it wants traffic to be moved. It is in a very unique situation in that everything seems to have to dump onto one state highway or State Street, which becomes a state highway, and they're kind of stuck right there. And that it makes some sense for them to have gone through a process of saying, we need some collector roads where they don't exist. We know it's going to be super hard to get that, but who knows, a developer in the future recognizing the incredible value of being so close to the river might be willing to invest in that. But in the meantime, we want them to know we want a collector street system in Garden City. So with that, I'm going to wait until Commissioner Pickering says something, and then I'm prepared to make a substitute motion.
Madam President, that was my next question for you. All right, Commissioner Pickering.
Thank you. And I appreciate, Justin presenting all 14 of the requests and the discussion so far from the commissioners. I would say I agree with 10 through 14 absolutely need to be added to the master street map. And I would include number 2 and number 7 and 8 from Garden City in particular. And this is, again, my approach to this and why I'm making this request is because of that landlocked nature, how Chinden is isolating certain chunks of these neighborhoods. And it's, this is a planning document, right? And I, Commissioner Goldthorpe mentioned, these would be huge impacts to property owners, right? We have no idea, and that might be the case for sure, but we have no idea if a property owner goes up and buys that huge stretch of land and just makes it work for them with that connection going through that property. So I feel like it's presumptuous of us to say, this would be hugely impactful. Sure, as it currently exists today, but this is a planning document that's going to help the city, ACHD, developers all think, okay, how can we make the most out of the land that currently exists and having it have the highest use and highest and best use. So I would add 10 through 14, so include 13, and then as well as 2 and 7 and 8.
Are you making a substitute?
That would be my substitute motion, Madam
And I'll
President.
second that motion.
All right, we have a substitute motion before us. Is there any discussion on the substitute motion?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Justin, So this is so important. I love this opportunity to really dig in and understand what our role is, and to understand what we now have to do as policymakers to clarify our policies so that our partner land use agencies know how to enter into that. This is a unique Ada County thing, this whole master street map for Ada County. As far as I know, if Meridian has it within Meridian's departments of development and land use and transportation and stuff, I don't know, but this is a unique thing, and I really value that. Okay, we will respect that they're held accountable by the voters. If they say this is how we want development to happen, and the voters say, "Are you crazy?" and they kick them all out, and they come back to us and change it. But that's the nature of the process. But what they do is they lay a vision out there in the long range, and because they don't have the authority to go and condemn that property. They got to wait until somebody's going to develop it. At least their vision is out there, and there's something on the map that says, okay, in this whole connected system of streets in our county, this is how they're going to connect with all the arterials and collector roads. So I really, really appreciate that you have put this together, laid it out in as clear a way as you have, and that we can move forward with as many as possible, and hopefully all of the ones that Commissioner Pickering has selected.
All right, so we have a substitute motion. I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. Okay, back to the original motion.
Madam President, just a request or debate on the original motion, to request that the maker of the motion would consider including number 13, because things are moving fast in that area. So that,
Sure. I would amend my motion to include 13.
Thank you.
Okay, so your motion then, Commissioner Goldthorpe?
11, 12, 13, and 14 to approve.
Right?
10.
I'll accept that.
Thank you.
So we have a second on that one. All right,
Just point of
further discussion?
clarification, Madam President. Commissioner Goldberg, did you say 10 through 14?
No,
or
11
okay.
through.
Excluding you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, any further discussion? We'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the amended motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, how are we doing? Do we want to take a quick break? Yeah, let's take a 10-minute break. Okay,
Good discussion.
all righty. And we'll have that more in-depth. To go on now and have the presentation by Ms. Brooke Green on the 8th Street Bikeway Concept Study, and we will also be hearing from Zach Pipemeyer. Welcome, Zach. All right, Ms. Green.
I'll let them get this all squared away.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's certainly a privilege to be back before you. For the record, Madam President, Commissioners, Brooke Green, Senior Transportation Planner within Projects and Planning. As highlighted, this is an update regarding the 8th Street Bikeway Concept Study. It's also a briefing in preparation for us going out to the public for additional further dialogue with the public as well as the stakeholders in the area. Today's presentation is going to be a joint meeting. I'll present first, and then I'll yield my time to Zach Pietmeyer with CCDC, who will talk about, in particular, their portion of the project. Just to recap, and this actually slide should look somewhat similar, but I want to highlight a few changes. At the direction that we received from the commission, we did adjust some of our planning boundaries. In particular, you're going to see that highlighted there in blue. The blue portion is ACHD's portion, and you're going to see that we've got 8th Street, and I don't know if this has a little, here we go. So we've got 8th Street portion here, which was already existing in the original plan that we took out to the public, but at the direction of the commission, we were asked to go ahead and examine 9th Street. And in short, we've pretty much created a couplet that we're looking at, and we're going to go over those slides and those alternatives here in a moment. But I do really want to highlight this red portion right here. This is CCDC's existing portion. When we go out to the public here in a week, the only portion of the project, and we're going to be asking for feedback in, pertains only to ACHD's portion, which is highlighted here in blue. Zach's going to go ahead and update you where they're at with their red portion. Now, just as a quick recap, we did go out to the public previously pertaining to this project, did get some feedback, and so I will leave it to CCDC to talk about what that looks like for their portion. And before I leave this slide, just really quick, this yellow portion is the Franklin Bikeway. And we've talked about that and is actually in consideration right now. So quickly to go over the project objectives, it is to provide a consistent low-stress bike connection between Boise's North End and the Greenbelt, which reflects ACHD's commitment to our adopted LTS guidelines. In addition to that, it's to support CCDC's project, which includes streetscape upgrades, transit improvements, utility work, and coordination with the private residents and redevelopment along that corridor. As we quickly go through the timeline, we have been before you on several occasions pertaining to this project. I don't need to go too far into depth, but I do want to highlight the last time we were before you and some of the main themes that came out of that. When we were before you in August, we received direction to go ahead and look at 9th Street. In addition to that, we received direction to look back at the Concept A, which was the concept that came out of the original public engagement. In all of that discussion, the main themes which we have discussed and the team has gone back to review is how do we move forward a project that protects the streetscapes? How do we address some of the safety concerns, in particular the contraflow concerns and bike head conflicts that were brought up from stakeholders? How do we address the parking impacts? And lastly, how do we re-examine that drop-off and loading functions there in front of St. John's and St. Joe's School? Just quickly to recap, these were the initial concepts that we brought before you. Concept A, Concept B, and Concept C. It is Concept A that the public did weigh in on and was the front runner coming out of the original outreach efforts. This is Concept A in April and May. You're going to see that we did make some modifications. We did actually revert the parking back before in front of St. John's and St. Joe's. You're going to see that highlighted. At this location, you're going to see that contraflow bike facility that is at grade with the sidewalk. And you're going to see that travel lane that goes to the north, the bike lane, the parking strips, and then the sidewalk. This was a staff recommendation. As mentioned, this was the public preferred option. However, we did highlight some concerns and conflicts at St. John's and St. Michael's Cathedral, which I'll speak to here in the coming next slides. At the August Commission, what we heard from you is that you want us to go back and look at the modification for Concept A. In particular, Commissioner Goldthorpe, we did take some of your comments into consideration. We are putting forward a concept that we do believe may answer some of those concerns and questions that you asked us to delve a little bit deeper into. In addition to that, you asked us to look at 8th and 9th Street in particular as a couplet. And so we've got Concept D and Concept E, which we'll be presenting to you today. So quickly, let's just go ahead and get into that. So Concept D and Concept E is what I'll be speaking to here in a moment. I do want to highlight, if we make any modifications to 9th Street, we do have to make modifications to 8th Street. So I'll review D and E first, and then I'll talk about 8th Street here in a moment. So quickly, for concept D, what you've got here is you have got a southbound protected bike lane. It replaces parking on the east side of 9th Street. And just so you're aware, this is the area which we're looking at. And this is kind of what that rendering would potentially look like. So you have that bike lane that will be on the east side as it traverses down to Franklin. For this project, and in particular for 9th Street, we only looked at Union through Franklin. We did not go any further south than Franklin. Continue along here, you've got 4th Street and you've got Hayes. That same configuration applies. You've got, at this point, you've got the 2 travel lanes, you've got the bike facility, you've got the bike facilities, you've got the parking. We did look at removing a travel lane through this corridor and concluded that it would not actually meet ACHD standards. And so rather than taking a travel lane, we looked to taking a parking lane instead. I wanted to highlight several conflict points along this corridor. Should the facilities stay on the east side, the bike facilities stay on the east side, your first conflict that you're going to run into is there at the co-op, which actually happens to be their designated loading and unloading zone. And then you have got the conflict there at St. Joe's School, which is actually a designated loading and unloading zone. In addition to that, you have got this conflict here at Franklin Street. In particular, if you're a cyclist that's coming down, you're going to actually have to cross over to 8th Street, continue down cross over Franklin, continue down Franklin, and then make that turn onto 8th Street to continue along a designated bike facility. Some of the pros and cons pertaining to concept D. Pros, it does avoid potential conflicts along the 8th Street frontage. So back to 8th Street and that concerns with St. John's and St. Joe's, it does address that. It does meet existing LTS guidelines. It lowers impacts to vehicle travel lanes than concept A, which we took out to the public earlier. It does avoid crossing 9th Street to access the eastbound Franklin Bikeway and does maintain landscaping and trees. On the flip side, some of the concerns pertaining to this is this does require out of direction travel for cyclists coming south from 8th Street. So if you were traversing from the north end and you wanted to get down to downtown core, if you were on the east side, you were actually going to go over to 9th, down to Franklin, and then back over to 8th, as opposed to just go down straight down 8th Street. So there is that out of direction travel that is potential. Conflicts at the co-op 9th Street driveway approach, I did highlight that. Southbound cyclists would need to cross 8th Street. I did highlight that as one of the conflict points. And as mentioned, it does remove that designated 9th Street loading zone for St. Joe's as well as the co-op.
Madam President.
Commissioner McKinney.
I'm sorry, Brooke, just going back there, those 2 conflicts that we're talking about at St. Joe's and at the co-op, talking about the physical nature of the conflict there, what's there, what does the bike lane do? Can you give me some physical details on that?
Yes, Madam President and Commissioner McKinney, I'll do the best I can to navigate that question, really in pertaining to the loading zone. Mm-hmm. So for the co-op in particular, this is their loading zone designated for like their grocers, their suppliers to come into that space. If we were to keep the bike facility on the east side, it would disrupt that loading zone. Potentially, it would actually make it go away in essence, because we put the designated space pertaining specifically to the cyclist navigating that area. Well, we do have loading zones in other areas of town where there could be a conflict with that actual bike lane itself. Maybe some accommodations can be made, but it's definitely one that we wanted to call out. In addition to that, if we get down to St. Joe's, right here where it's a designated loading and unloading, that's where they load and unload children to go to the school. So in addition to the frontage that they have on 8th Street, they also use 9th Street to load and unload children needing to access that school. So again, it would disrupt that space pertaining to, it would put priority to the cyclists as opposed to the cars pulling up and dropping their kids off.
Okay.
They would have to locate other areas in which to do that.
So at St. Joe's, we're talking about a curbside pickup and drop-off lane.
Yes, sir.
And the bike path takes the place of that lane? Okay. And then at the co-op, is it just a curbside loading zone? It's not a driveway type where trucks come in and out. It's a...
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I would have to look into that if there is an area in which they can pull in and drop off. I don't recall that being the case. I think it's just a loading and unloading location right there in front of or adjacent to the co-op.
Okay.
I think I had the same question as well. Is that where they take delivery, like for the school, when the trucks come in for the cafeteria, et cetera? So I would have that same question.
Madam President, as it pertains to St. Joe's, so they do have a driveway access right here that enables them to get.
Oh, it's beyond. Okay.
This is in addition to some of their other actual configurations around their campus that enables them to have
The
drop-off
loading
and
zone is
pickup.
just specific to the children.
I suspect, in addition to that, if other suppliers use that to provide any type of supplies to the school, certainly they're welcome to do it. It is a designated space for that purpose.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, moving along, concept E. So we've taken that same approach, being able to provide that on-street bike facility. In this case, we actually moved it to the west side. So this is that, again, that protected bike facility going southbound from the north end. So then rather than taking the space over by the co-op, we actually have reverted them to the actual west side. So instead of the bike facility being right next to the co-op, it's now located on that west side, and they traverse down through the area. In the case for this, we have got the Fort 2 Union, same configuration. You have got the bike facility, protected bike facility, the parking lane, the travel lanes, the sidewalk, and then the co-op. Down here where you've got closer to the school, same configuration. Now you've got that parking lane and loading. You've got the travel lanes. Now you've got that protected bike facility. And just want to highlight one of the conflict points along here. Rather than the conflict points being there at the co-op, adjacent to the co-op and adjacent to St. Joe's and the loading areas, the conflict now arises at 9th Street, specifically pertaining to cyclists. So if a cyclist was coming southbound to the northbound and wanted to traverse to the designated bike facility on 8th Street, they're going to need to stop here at 9th Street. Then they're going to have to cross 9th Street to continue onto Franklin Street. To the pros and cons, and we'll talk about that again, that outer directional travel, would they rather just go to 8th Street and go straight down if that's their destination? Certainly that's why we look to this couplet as one alternative to move forward to the public and get their feedback on. So the pros and cons, it does, as I mentioned, it does avoid the potential conflicts along 8th Street frontage that pertains to both of them because it shifts the cyclist over to the 9th Street as opposed to 8th Street. As mentioned earlier, it does meet our LTS guidelines, does have that lower impact to the vehicle travel lanes, the concept A. This one in particular avoids those conflicts at the co-op, as well as it preserves the loading zone at St. Joe's and does maintain landscaping and trees. Back to the cons, as I highlighted, is that that requires out of direction travel for cyclists going down into the downtown core. You now have to go over to 9th Street and then traverse back. Does require that crossing at 9th Street at Franklin that I highlighted as a potential conflict point. It does removal of travel lane north of Fort, which is a marginal increase in delay at 9th and Fort. So concept D and E, and I'm going to just kind of bring all of these up here at one time. So concept D and E, if we make any modifications to 9th Street to accommodate cyclists, now we're going to have to look to ensuring that we have accommodations for cyclists that are going now northbound on 9th Street. In particular, and some of this should not look, it should look not so new because you've seen this in the previous iterations. So let's start down here at Franklin and Hayes. This is what you've seen with concept A that was put forward. You have got the parking facility, the travel lane, additional parking, and then the bike lane going northbound. When we get up here to Hayes to Fort, and to kind of orient you to where that looks like, that's right there in front of the church as well as in front of St. Joe's. And instead you have got that parking space. We retain 2 travel lanes. In particular, one of those travel lanes is designated left turn movements to enable them to turn left onto Fort. And then that through lane to continue up north into 8th Street. And then you have got that bike facility. Continuing north along this segment, you have got parking on both sides and you've got 1 travel lane. And then you have got that bike lane. Are there any questions about D and E before I move on to modified concept A?
Any questions?
Just a quick question.
Commissioner Hanson?
On just the previous slide, you'd be doing the same things on, D and E. They're basically the same. Yeah, and then an earlier slide on E, you said about the required crossing at Franklin. Since it's already a future designated low stress bikeway, and that we've invested now on 11th Street, and we're not going to put a low stress bike lane on State Street, so we really want to move on that at some point. Is there some temporary facility that could be put to mitigate the potential conflicts, knowing that eventually we'll have a design, it might be a raised intersection or whatever, so that it sort of highlights this is how movement of, this is how cyclists get onto the two-way track south of Franklin as they head down 9th. Is that, are there ways of treating that?
Madam President, Commissioner Hansen, and help me if I don't answer your question. So what I hear you saying is, are we able to put some sort of temporary bike facility at 9th and Franklin that complements the existing Franklin Bikeway that's currently under design right now?
No, the reason why people might not want to use that and then cross to get onto the multi-use or the two-way cycle track is because of the crossing. So you make the crossing a little safer, slower, whatever. You can do that with temporary facilities so that it mitigates one of the main concerns you have about concept E in it's actually the only conflict point. If you, maybe it's the couple of slides back where you say this is the real conflict point. But to a great extent, we're going to address that conflict if we are true to our word, and we're going to build that low-stress bikeway.
Madam President, Commissioner Hansen, I certainly stand at the direction from the commission if they want to see any type of temporary enhancements put in that place. Certainly the Franklin Bikeway is currently moving forward, and so this is a complementary addition, but I would stand at the direction of the commission if that is what you guys would like to see move forward.
Okay.
So,
Madam President,
Commissioner Goldberg.
just a quick question. If you go back a slide there, that concept D from Hayes to Fort, the parking lane, would that also serve okay as a drop-off point or a place that a hearse could park for a funeral and things like that?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, it already actually provides that type of access.
Oh yeah, I know. The
parking,
church
yes.
was afraid with our other plans that was going to be either greatly impeded or eliminated.
Madam President and Commissioner Goldthorpe, with the concept A that we have put forward to the public and received feedback for, it does preserve the parking in front of St. John's as well as St. Joe's. So should they utilize that for hearse or funerals or weddings, it's certainly available for them to do so. That was why modified concept A had moved forward originally.
Thanks.
So moving forward, this is that modified, concept A, I misspoke. Concept A is what was put forward before the public. Your team has gone back the last couple months. Commissioner Goldthorpe, we do believe that this is what you were alluding to in our conversations in August. This is what the technical team sat back, took a look and said, how can we accommodate all the uses along this one particular segment while still providing for that cyclist who needs to navigate north? So I'm quickly going to go through this and give you an idea of what the team has concluded. So what you've got before you, as I mentioned, is that modified concept A. It's a bike lane channelization. You've got 16 feet of sidewalk. You have 3 feet of landscape buffer. You have got a bike lane. And then you have a vertical element that separates the cyclists from those who are trying to navigate or walk through this space. And then you have a 5-foot sidewalk. Then you have that parking lane. Then you have that northbound travel lane. And then you've got the bike facilities that actually stays, which is actually what modified concept A was originally. So your big changes all occur right here. The existing curb to curb width, you're going to see designated with the dotted space. And you're going to see public right-of-way. So it's got right here at the stairs, continuing on to the parking lot on the adjacent side. To give you an idea, this is what it looks like as a rendering. This is what it looks like from above. So we've taken the cyclists who are trying to navigate down 8th Street from the north end, who want to continue down the existing contraflow bike facility that we have on State Street. So you have got that designated bike facility that is protected. You now have a sidewalk. So it enables any kids or anybody, parishioners, anybody who parks, wants to get out of their car, they actually have a sidewalk to stand on. And then what it does is it channels them to specific crossings along that corridor. In particular, what we had heard was there was concerns about cyclists actually having impeding pedestrians navigating through this space. By giving them the designated channel locations to cross, we're able to highlight that there's an expectation that there will be pedestrians at that location. What you also see, and is it's hard to show here, but that vertical element, and gave you an idea of what that vertical element potentially could look like. In this case, like a fencing. And so if you get out of your car, you're standing there as a child, you can navigate to an appropriate crossing, cross. And then we've got landscape buffer space, and then you have that 16 feet of landing space. That landing space currently is 21 feet. It is all within public right-of-way, and so the modifications that we're putting forward do exist within our public right-of-way. I highlighted some pictures down here to give you an idea of what that image could potentially look like. This should look pretty familiar. This is actually what you see at floating bus stops. So it's green paint, so it really designates where you're going to have that existing conflict. You have got that fencing, you've got that landing space for sidewalks. This is potentially what a fencing could look like. And that's what that bike facility would look like navigating through that space, and gives you an idea of kind of a landscape buffer, what that potentially could look like. So we've called this the bike lane channelization. It does still meet the needs of being able to provide a facility for those who are coming from the north end downtown. It does connect to the existing bike facility south of State Street. But more importantly, what it does is it designates space and use for everyone who we anticipate in this area at one time.
Madam President.
Commissioner Pickering.
Thanks. Brooke, I really appreciate the vertical image and the examples, some that we know currently exist, right? And because I think, to your point, you know, having very specific uses for everyone reduces chaos, it increases safety, it increases confidence that they know that they're in the right place, whether that's a little one or a bicyclist or someone that's parking. So I just really appreciate you taking folks' feedback and coming up with this and showing it to us. And I was just, my one question is, what's the rationale behind the 3 clustered crossings and then obviously the one on the furthest right? So why 3 and not maybe 2, or could you explain?
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, that's a very good question. And so why you see the crossings where they're at, first of all, of course, the crosswalks located at those 2 locations. We certainly want to ensure those were still there. But what we also want to do is it actually aligns with the cathedral itself. So you're going to see, should you park at this location, is a direct connections to the stairs. In this case, is actually a direct connection to this loading area. And this is a driveway apron, so there still enables, you know, should they need to get into that space as a vehicle themselves, they can certainly still get into that space. But we do have that designated actual PED facility. And then right here is actually where the entrance to the school is, so it gives them one more connection. We also wanted to limit the amount of out of direction travel. So say if you're parking, in reality, you're walking maybe 7 to 10 feet to get to that designated crossing. So it certainly limits that out of direction travel for folks, persons maybe with a disability. This is kind of the direction that they would be traveling probably if they just got out of the car today. And so we really wanted to limit that out of direction travel. That's why there's so many crossings available. I see another question coming.
Madam President.
Commissioner McKee.
Brooke, the sidewalk there that's immediately adjacent to the curb on the west side, adjacent to the parking, at its extreme ends, I'm just curious about the treatment there at the extreme ends. Is there a curb at the end of it that sort of directs pedestrians on that segment to cross over to the main sidewalk? Or is there going to be some sort of I can imagine a pedestrian wanting to walk from the end of that sidewalk segment over to the crosswalk, for example, which would cross the bike pathway. In any case, that looks like kind of a risky. How is that treated there to deal with that issue?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, that's a really good question that I don't have the level of detail that probably would answer some of that. We can provide a nice transition space for folks who, if they want to cross at this location, ideally we're going to want to channel them down to these designated crossings. This does what it is. You've got this kind of mounting space and then it comes down back to grade. And so certainly that could be some configurations that we can address and design. Because to your point, if you're a car and you want to get over here, get out of your car, get on the sidewalk and come over here as a pedestrian that may not have a disability, it's probably easy to navigate that space. We'll have to take into account in design what those elements potentially could look like and maybe limit those conflicts a little bit more.
Okay, so so what you're saying is that's something that hasn't really been worked out yet.
Yes, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, that is the case.
Okay, let me ask one other question then. This modified concept A then is distinct from concepts D and E, right? Concept E, for example, only has the bike path on the east side here, and And let me just say, while I'm talking, I have to admit, I like the fact that in concept E, the bike lanes they line up so you're riding on the right side of the road for your direction of travel. And I think that's good for both of them, as opposed to feeling like you're on the left side of a road. That's always a little bit unnerving, I think, for most people accustomed to driving on the right side of the road. Anyway, just one comment. Thanks.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, thank you.
All right, moving along to the. So I'll quickly go over the pros and cons for modified concept A. So as highlighted, these are the same benefits as the previous concept A that was the preferred option from the public when we took it out the first time. This does reduce conflicts between students loading and unloading and the bike facility itself. There are no impacts to on-street parking capacity versus the original concept A. I do want to add also, it does provide continuity, and I didn't highlight on as a pros, but I'll speak to it briefly. It does provide continuity through the whole corridor. So the expectation is if you're on the Greenbelt and you're navigating north to get to the north end, this matches the existing conditions that you find from the Greenbelt all the way up to State Street. So there is that additional pro that I could highlight. As the cons, it reduces the public gathering space there in front of the church, which used to be 21 feet. Now what we've got is 16 feet and then that landscape buffer space. It does, landscaping and fencing does require some additional maintenance. Any concerns pertaining to cons and pros before I move on to the next slide? All right, I do want to highlight the parking impacts for each alternative that we're bringing forward to the public. Concept D and E is 27 spaces removed, whereas modified concept A is 29. So there is a little bit of a difference. And then next steps. So we are taking this out to the public for an additional outreach effort that's going to take place next week. So what you can anticipate that the public is going to weigh in on was modified concept A, concept D, and concept E. So we will be taking those forward to the public, get their feedback, see what their preference is, and be back before you at an appropriate time at commission direction pertaining to the follow-up. At this point, I'd like to yield the rest of my presentation to Zach from CCDC, who is going to talk in particular to the CCDC.
Thank you, Brooke. Madam President, Commissioners, Zach Pietmeyer, Project Manager with CCDC. As she mentioned, St. Michael's had some concerns about the original concept A that were very similar to St. John's, so some of this will look very familiar. But I did want to take an opportunity to walk back through some of those concerns and highlight some of the recent actions we've taken to try to address those concerns. So what you're seeing here is the original concept A rendering looking north on 8th from State Street, and St. Michael's is on the right-hand side of the image. You'll recall that one of their main concerns was the reduction in on-street parking capacity, and specifically here would be the removal of the parking lane on the west side of the road, where that southbound bike lane coming straight at you in the image is. In addition, they did have some other concerns specific to Concept A. So related to weddings and funerals, St. Michael's was concerned that they would not be able to conduct those events as they do now, which includes staging vehicles in the area highlighted red in the image there. We note that these parking stalls will still be available with Concept A, and so that specific use should be available to them in the future. There were also concerns related to the relocation of 2 ADA on-street parking stalls highlighted blue here from 8th Street. You may recall also that due to the northbound protected bike lane, we had originally proposed shifting those from 8th Street to a position around the corner on State Street, and that was a concern for the church. And then finally, very similar to St. John's, St. Michael's had concerns about the potential conflict and safety of those parking on 8th Street as they exited their vehicles and crossed the bike lane when they're trying to access the sidewalk or entryway into the church. So, related to the ADA parking concern, we presented a schematic very similar to this back in August at the work session, or excuse me, in May at the work session, illustrating a way that we could maintain that ADA parking in its current position on 8th Street. So simply creating a larger buffer space between the bike lane and the on-street parking would allow for ADA compliant access to those vehicles. We've since contemplated a number of other modifications to Concept A at this specific location to provide really more of a separation between all the separate uses there. Specifically, similar to what Brooke was presenting, a minimum 3-foot wide buffer would be proposed, separating the sidewalk from the proposed northbound bike lane. And this could be anything from colored or textured concrete surfacing to raised planters or landscaping, or some other above grade feature which would help establish physical spaces and discourage pedestrian mixing in the bike lane. Between the bike lane and those ADA parking stalls, we're proposing a permanently mounted railing to, again, better delineate the mode spaces and to prevent people exiting their vehicles from inadvertently stepping into the bike lane. There would be an opening in the railing right at the midpoint between the two ADA stalls on 8th Street to allow people to cross the bike lane at a designated, marked, and expected location, and would be wide enough to accommodate funeral or wedding functions that need to access the street at that location. And I just want to point out again, the space currently used to stage vehicles for funerals and weddings would still be there in the future. So this is a slightly different rendering with the modified concept A. You do see the buffer space between the sidewalk and the bike lane. It's colored red in this image, but it is creating that separated space for bikes and pedestrians. And then again, that railing separating the bike facility from the on-street parking and that wider loading area next to the ADA stalls. And although this rendering is specific to St. Michael's, the treatment shown could very well be duplicated at St. John's, just like Brooke was talking about. So we recently coordinated these proposed modifications with Concept A with St. Michael's along their frontage. And we really worked with them to identify a way to help mitigate the changes that were happening to those two ADA stalls noted in blue here. And we ended up coming up with a solution to actually add yet another third ProAx stall around the corner on State Street that would help achieve some of their goals with access to their facilities. So in the end, we'll actually end up hopefully with improved ADA access to the facilities. And while St. Michael's may not be a vocal supporter of the modified Concept A, I believe we've made progress with them. The changes that we've made are, to me at least, a reasonable and feasible way to progress forward, addressing many of the current concerns that they have. So in reflection, just as Brooke presented to the north, the modified Concept A here on the CCDC section to the south is not really a new concept. Other than a few site-specific modifications at St. Michael's, it's the same basic Concept A that we presented before. Concepts D and E, on the other hand, are wholly new concepts, but they only focus on improvements north of Franklin on the ACHD section. So it's our impression that Concepts D and E can be taken to the public and evaluated further this fall, independent of the CCDC section to the south. Modified Concept A still is the design team, or the interagency design team's preferred alternative for the CCDC section, and it's our recommendation to the commission. So regardless of which alternative is selected for the ACHD section to the north, we're confident in our outreach and our property owner coordination efforts to the south, and we believe Concept A, or the modified Concept A, is still the best alternative to meet the project's objectives. And as was mentioned, it was daylighted back in August at the August 17th work session, and then again at the September 22nd joint meeting, that the commission may want to consider moving ahead with the selection of the preferred alternative on CCDC's section. So we just want you to know that we're ready to proceed at such time you are ready to make that decision. We're eager to move into final design and construction, and we would ask for you to consider that at your earliest convenience. So with that, we'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Zach. We can certainly discuss that here today, but I would certainly not object to having CCDC get going and move forward, and you go out to the public for an outreach and get some additional input on the changes that have been made. So like I say, I would have no objection to that at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, thanks, President May. I agree. I wouldn't have objection to that. I think that makes a whole lot of sense, because the way in which you've come up with concepts D and E and the modifications to A, which have incorporated the commission's concerns, they really do kind of operate separately. If you go back to the slides, I had a question just on St. Michael's, and that is really to do with State Street. Right there at that corner, go back another slide. Possible. There we go. So State Street after 9/11 was narrowed significantly, but that part right in front of St. Michael's is still as wide as it was, and then it tapers down, and it looks like unused a little bit of unused space right in the middle of the road. And is there a way in which you could sort of shift and start the narrowing of State Street in front of St. Michael's instead of further down, so that they had a little bit more gathering space? I think one of the concerns they raised is, unlike St. John's, they don't have the gathering space in front of the church. The church is built much closer to the curb, and that, in fact, the front of the church is on State Street. So where hearses at funerals and so forth pull up in front of the church on State Street, and that's typically where there's the movement across. So I just wondered if, since I think it's in CCDC's realm, whether that's even been contemplated, maybe taking that. You see that? Yeah, there's an arrow, that space. I always hate to see wasted space. We still have to pave it and maintain it and sweep it and plow it and all that. And if it's not really necessary, why not just sort of shift it a little bit and give them that much more of a landing spot? It might also make that proposed stall, that green stall, even more easier to navigate into.
Yep, Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, great question. So my understanding of that space, it is the shadow for a left turn lane on the opposing side of the intersection. So it's possible that some narrowing could happen. We'd have to take a look at weaving maneuver, not weaving, but transitions through the intersection, because you have different lane configurations on the east and west legs. So we can look at that, yeah.
Okay, just something I might throw out there, a shadow. That means that so that it's aligned with the part that's on the other side.
So the eastbound and westbound through lanes align on.
And I got very excited on a previous slide. So one more slide. Before there, is that a new curb extension on the corner in front of the old bank building? Would that be a new curb extension into State Street?
Madam President, Commissioner, that is shown in that image. That is currently not part of the project, so that would.
Oh, well, I would love a new curb extension. That would be really great.
Madam President.
Commissioner Pickering.
I would agree with President May and Commissioner Hanson. I think CCDC should just go ahead, move forward with your concept A, and I really appreciate you working side by side with our staff to make sure that they're, whatever happens with our next portion of ACHD's, our portion. I feel like there will be continuity with the vertical elements, potentially all of those other nuts and bolts. So I appreciate you working with them. I feel like you've improved and heard our constituents' concerns, and you've made it even better. So I appreciate you doing that. And I'm really excited to see you guys move forward.
Are you going to back closing?
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney?
If I may, I just have one question for Zach, and I wish that plan view were still up. Going to the north from the section, okay, yeah. So sort of on the right-hand side, we've got the sort of, I guess, the diverted bike lane section that's by those handicap stalls. And then we go back to when the bike lane is back closer to the roadway there to the right. Yeah, that buffer that's between now the curb and the bike lane, how wide is that? Is that like a 5-foot sidewalk, kind of like was proposed in front of the other church, or is it just like a 3-foot buffer? Is that what it is? Just a concrete buffer?
Madam President, Commissioner, it's more of the 3-foot realm. It's not the full sidewalk. You can kind of see a relative dimension of the 6-foot area adjacent to the ADA stalls, so approximately half that, yeah.
Okay, so it's pretty much just a space to allow motorists to open and close their doors without impeding the bike lane.
Step out onto a solid surface instead of into the grass, yeah.
All right.
Into the bike lane.
And so this then would, we would have the one-way bike lanes on either side, and then at Franklin, they would, if D or E were selected, they would diverge at that point, and you'd have the couplet with 8th and 9th.
That's correct.
Combined. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Green.
Madam President, Commissioners, I do just want to verify a couple things and then just remind you, should this be the direction that the commission would like to take, you have it on your agenda as an action item.
Right.
So before we move into that, I just want to recap what I'm hearing from the commission is potentially the desire that CCDC's portion moves forward, and we will take our portion that we highlighted in blue in the first slide out to the public for public comment.
Correct. So
I'll make
commissioners,
that
if there are
motion.
no other questions, okay.
Since
Commissioner
you said
Hanson?
it.
Second.
Mr. Price, did you have as we go to discussion on our motion?
Oh, there's a motion on that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just took Brooke's word and put, I move that.
And we've got a second. So any discussion on the motion? All right. Well,
I just wanted, when we do take it out, Brooke, would you make sure and highlight that there is a planned future low-stress bikeway on Franklin? And that's why we're looking at that. So that crossing in the future, that is a low-stress bikeway. So people know when they're looking at these different options, D and E, that, okay, how is that going to fit with the Franklin crossing? Thank you.
all right. So we will
If
call
I
for the vote
may.
or further discussion.
Before we vote, yeah,
Commissioner
just one
McKinney?
comment. I have to admit that, throughout the process of looking at this 8th Street bikeway, I have been a little bit hesitant about the whole concept of removing travel lanes in order to put in bike lanes. And I think there are some places where that can work. There are other places where it definitely can't work. This is one of those where I'm still a little bit uncertain about that, but I'm willing to get on board with this.
Very good. We appreciate all the work that went into this
Yes,
with
lots of work.
both teams. So thank you very much. So I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you both very much. All right.
Want to do Mayor McClellan a favor?